Hi, welcome to TV Social. We're at the lovely Kef Studios on Great Portland Street, aren't we?
I think it's the Kef Experience.
It was the Kef Experience. I've already cut it up. That's all right.
Engineering Foundry.
Is that what it stands for?
It is, actually.
Did not know that.
I know.
And we have the wonderful Ifat Chowdhury with us from Involved Visual Collaboration or Communication.
Collaboration.
I have to get that right.
It's good to collaborate.
It is good to collaborate. This is collaborating, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been a long time coming.
It really has. I actually can't believe we're in the same room.
I know. I can't believe it either.
That it's actually happened.
We're on tour again. I think we're mixing up the idea of podcasting out on location, meeting new people, new experiences, new places, new stuff. Every day's a learning day. So
Today's been very learning.
But we're going to move into today's episode, which is to talk about your journey into the AV industry and really sort of get an idea of how that started and where life takes you, and you know, your involvement in lots of parts of the industry now. I believe that's fairly varied and wide, so we're going to diverse into lots of different bits of the conversation. Just give us an introduction. You know, who is Ifat?
I ask myself that question every day. No, I don't. I should. So I've been in the industry for coming up for 20 years now. Before that, I was a teacher and what we would call an end user.
An actual teacher in a classroom?
An actual
What was
teacher
your
in a
teaching
classroom.
subject?
I was in charge of ICT, but primary.
Cool.
So at that time. And the school wasn't doing too well. So this was early 2000s. And the local authority, we went into special measures, basically. So it was a failing school. I know people don't like using the term, but it was deemed as a failing school. And so the local authority selected us to be one of the first to get tech to raise standards to really just focus on teaching and learning. So we were one of the first schools in our borough to receive funding for smart boards, and it was with Smart. So I looked after that project for the school, was obviously working really closely with the integrator. And over time, the integrator was looking for somebody to look after video conferencing for their schools, for their customers. And I ended up...
In a time when video conferencing really wasn't a thing, was it?
No.
It was not plug and play either, was it?
No, it was clunky, huge pieces of kit and codecs and dial-up. It was painful. Yeah. So that was my step.
We have to stop and just interject with the sound of dial-up. So this is task number one for Mike and Laurie. We need the sound of dial-up internet to be played right about
I love that.
now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's a throwback. It's like a pop quiz moment. What is this sound? So yeah, and then I was in integration for a few years. My children were at primary school. I ended up leaving the industry for about 6 years and then coming back. So I ended up going into teacher training. So I was getting more involved in supporting teachers using tech, and so did that for a while the kids were at school, and then ended up coming back. Like so many people do, it's like bad penny.
It's like a magnet, innit? Yeah.
Or a bad penny.
No, I wouldn't say bad penny.
So yeah.
Did you find the tech helped at the school when you got the special measures? Did you see the difference? Because you were on like the coalface of it. You're there doing the teaching, aren't you?
At the time, I think the challenge was getting the staff trained up to use it, which has always been an issue. So using it over and above it being a projection screen and actually getting people to use it interactively, that's always been a challenge. I still think that most interactive displays are probably used 20, maybe 30% of in terms of their capability and the kind of functionality that you have. Even now, even where people will have, they'll be used to their iPhones and their smartphones, and they're used to doing things in their hand, they still won't transfer that in a classroom setting
into a board.
Yeah.
No.
What do you think because it's interesting when you talk about end user control, and over the years, I think there's lots of different options that have appeared. We've gone through analog into digital systems. End user control has always been the major stumbling block for a lot of AV integration to be successful, because you need those people to adopt whatever's being installed, and obviously a really good consultant or integrator is assessing the needs of that particular customer, working out exactly what they need in terms of usability and how those systems can be deployed every day and actually get used, so that there's a return on that investment. How do you think that could be addressed in the future, going forward? Because you've mentioned iPhones, iPads, and things like that. So we've got very intuitive controls in our hand every day that nobody even, you've never opened a manual for any of those devices. Yet when you say, here's a control for a microphone, people sort of like fall over, or here's our connection into a Teams room or something like that, and people just like lose their beep, because they've no idea how to interact with that. I've done my own beep. See that? That's
I ain't gonna be doing that.
No.
No.
Okay.
No.
Well, I was being helpful.
That was really good. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, how do you think that we can get past that as an industry? Because I think it's still one of the biggest hurdles.
It is, and I think there's a few things there's really interesting what you said, because training is always the thing that has the smallest budget. People want training for free. They don't want that, to our fault as an industry, too many integrators, I think, offer training for free. They don't put a value on it. If you don't put a value on something, people don't see the value in it. So having training and then having refresher training. So once they've had a few months with the kit that they've got in their spaces, to go back and say, right, how have you used it? What functions are you using? What are you not using? And actually doing a bit of an audit, which I don't know whether that sits under account management or whether that, and again, it depends from one organisation to another how you offer that to your end users. But it's about taking an interest in people using that kit. And too often, I'm going to say something that might be a bit...
Do it.
It's sell it and move on to the next sale.
Yeah, it's like hang and bang mentality, rather than actually worrying about what the end user's trying to achieve.
Instead of having that relationship with your end user and taking an interest in... Because when that kit goes wrong or when it's up for renewal, they might not even remember that it was you that put it in. They might be going somewhere else if you don't maintain that. So to me, that falls under account management and building those partnerships. But equally, it's about understanding from the outset what the customer wants to achieve. So I was talking to a colleague the other day, and we were talking about a particular NHS trust that we're working with, who have said if it's more than one button in the room, it's too much. So they want their control panel to be programmed in a way, because they know their end users, that it's not going to be where they've got to press a series of things. And it did make me chuckle, because I put a ghost alarm on my new car. And that's a challenge for me to remember it every day. But I kind of feel like it's a bit of a, am I going to get into my own car today? Is it going to start for me? Will I remember it? And I kind of think, is that what they're feeling in the room? That they don't want to break it? They don't want to, I don't want to flood my engine or end up in a panic.
It's so interesting watching that, the mental sort of gymnastics that people do when they walk into a room. And I mean, we work in AV and we sell AV equipment.
I just want to pick up on mental gymnastics, especially because this is like the last week of the Olympics, and I want to give you a 9.95.
Thanks, mate.
For that.
I'd have given you a 10.
Who gets gold?
Right, yeah. That was unintentional. But that idea, though, when you walk in, you're like, I don't know how that works. I don't know what's going on with it.
Yeah.
I've been in meeting rooms, and I've been guilty of this myself, where I've walked in, I've read like 2 pages of a PDF that's on the desk that's like tied on with a bulldog clip because people keep pinching it, and I've read it and I've followed everything and nothing works, and I've done it again and nothing still works. So I've pulled the screen off the wall, ripped a load of cabling out and bummed an HDMI straight into the side of the screen, into my laptop, and done it that way. And then the room has stayed like that for 6 months, and now that's the way that everyone in that building uses that screen. And I look at it, I'm like, where's the disconnection between what was asked for what the room's got to do, and what my use case is, compared to what's actually been put in?
And it makes you wonder if it was asked,
Yeah.
if
Was
those
it?
questions were asked at the design point.
Yeah, but then you get these defunct spaces, and it's
Yeah.
like we're all trying to save the planet, which is the right thing to do, but we end up flogging kit into spaces where you don't necessarily need it, or overcomplicating spaces that don't require that much technology to operate in the way that you want them to work. It's like I don't know how we get past that journey and make people think about it in a different way. But I think training is a huge part of that, because people don't adopt the room if they don't understand it.
No, and I think our mindset as an industry towards training is really poor.
Yeah.
That's a sweeping generalisation, but I do think it's poor.
As a teacher, then, obviously we've talked about this previously, that people coming through into AV, audio, whichever route you want to take, there aren't any dedicated particular routes to follow. As someone who's come through education into integration, where do you, and you do a lot of work with things like Avixa and stuff like that, so you're sort of on the council for setting standards. Training's a big part of that, obviously, for people within the industry, but as a pathway, there's very little defined, there's very few defined routes. So, you know, you don't obviously have a choice of universities to go to that you could go and study AV integration. It's just not a subject that's even considered. How do you think the industry could cope better in providing a unified approach to bringing people through, so that even as an offshoot of that, sending the training back comes because it's more accepted as an actual pathway? Does that make sense?
It does make sense, and one caveat: I have nothing to do with the standards. So just to say,
You should have owned it. But like, I'm all over
it
Uh,
this.
wasn't me.
I am the standards. That's the response we wanted.
But you're quite right. I am very involved with different elements of the Avixa Association. But there is a pathway. If you've heard of Jack Laidlaw, he's worked tirelessly to get curriculum set, and actually I think they're on to their second, possibly even third cohort now, going through the qualifications. So there is now a pathway for organisations to take on apprentices who will come out with a qualification in AV. It just takes so much time to put something like that together.
Yeah, totally.
Time, sponsorship, money, and then it's getting the message out there. So it is beginning to happen. It's just really slow.
Do you feel that, again? So that's like, I've just learned something that exists. We're making brandishing, sweeping statements that these things don't exist, and actually they are. So obviously there's a messaging element there that messaging needs to be spread wider, further, and the only way that can happen is if people know about it and adopt it and actually continue to collectively share that. So if it's a genuine option of accreditation, those credits are given by, you know, an industry body that's assessed them or written the standards that they want to be assessed. How can, this is a good point, how can others get involved in that?
They can get in touch with Avixa directly, or get in touch with Middlesbrough College. So
Is that the place where it runs out at the moment? It's Middlesbrough College.
Yeah.
And is that the only place in the UK then it's
Currently,
recognised?
yeah.
But then I take it facilities and what different courses universities have got, or
But it's
colleges have
distance
got.
as well, by the way.
Is it?
Yeah. So it doesn't matter where the young person
Okay.
is. It's online, so it's really very accessible.
That's
and
cool.
it's taken a lot of work. And Jack is phenomenal at what he does anyway, but it's a very defined route for AV.
We're going to put the link in the comments.
I will send you the link.
That would be really useful. So we want people to get involved in this, and I think it's really important. And one of the points of hosting this podcast was to provide people with more information, because we can have a chat, we can have a laugh, but actually the real message behind it is that we're plugging the air gap. And if there is an air gap, and I get this constantly, people are always looking for engineers, they're continuously looking for project managers. There is a huge shortfall of skilled workforce in, you know, across the board that is AV specific, and I think even within that there's probably gaps within the term AV, because we're talking specifically more about audio most of the time.
There's huge gaps in that. You look at commissioning engineers. Commissioning engineers are like worth the weight in gold, and they're really hard to get hold of. But to get a decent audio commissioner is ridiculous. You're always struggling to try and find someone who's got the time and the actual skill set, the knowledge, the ears, the experience to actually go and deliver and get the best out of a system to tune it right. And that's one of the things. So everyone in the industry gets a worse overall product because you've got a skill shortage to put it in, which is mad.
And there is also the Avixa suite of certifications as well and qualifications. So for someone who perhaps doesn't want to go to college and isn't at the apprentice stage, there's a whole suite of
like the
qualifications.
CTS courses, yeah.
Not just CTS.
There's other ones.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. So
we're learning today, which is good, and there's a point to that because that's good for us to know about. I mean, we don't have that need as a distributor as such, but personally, I'm very pro, obviously, providing young people with opportunities or anybody opportunities, and we have a growing team from all different walks of life and backgrounds. But if there are things that they can get involved in, again, we just need to make more noise about them collectively as a body of people within an industry to allow that accessibility to take place. It's really interesting, and I'm glad that we've been able to steer our conversation initially into something with a little bit of substance, because it's nice, it's important, and it means a lot. From a technical perspective, you've mentioned that you came through from IT. How did you find that transitional thing from IT into AV? Was it logical, or was it?
yeah, I mean, coming into video conferencing at that time, it was really logical. And now I kind of look at it and think, wow, like it's nothing, is it? You can FaceTime somebody on your phone, and that's, it's so much easier now.
Yeah.
To the point where I think I've lost skills
Right.
now. We've become lazier.
Because it's easy to just do that.
Yeah.
That's the same for everyone, though. Every human's memory since Auntie Google came along.
Yeah.
You don't need it, do you? So you don't remember it.
No. And I used to be the one who knew I could rattle off telephone numbers, and I couldn't tell you anybody's now. It's things like that I think, you've got to, exercise your brain a little bit.
Absolutely. So what does the future hold then in terms of, so as a subject, video conferencing, where is it going? Where do you feel, because obviously Teams, Zoom rooms exploded through the pandemic, but post that there's differences.
It's a really weird one because I was speaking to some people. Well, I was on a panel talking about audio actually a few days ago, and as is always the case, AI and being back in an office always comes up in conversation. And I think being back in an office, I personally find really hard. I find audio really hard in an office environment. I'm absolutely guilty of being the disruptive one when I go into the office, because it's like novelty. It's like people to talk to. But if you've got to sit at a desk in an open plan office and have a call with somebody, trying to hear, even just to focus on the rest of the call. So if there's a few people on the call and you're just passively listening, is really hard when there's stuff going on around you. The distractions are crazy. And I think that has really changed because of being at home and being able to focus. So AI, noise reduction. I work with a team of British Sign Language interpreters. So transcription, transcribing, those elements, we're seeing manufacturers thinking about that more and thinking about the deaf community more. So there's a lot happening. It's whether it's relevant and how much it's going to be taken up. And then obviously we've got the sustainability agenda as well. So people are looking at, well, if I do have this kit, what is it costing me to run? How many mics am I going to have? How many speakers am I going to have? How are they actually going to be powered? Are they on all the time? There's so much happening at the moment. It's quite...
Do you get the opportunity to feed that back to manufacturers as in the work that you do?
Yeah, we do to a point. We've got quite good relationships with some, but to be honest, most of the manufacturers we're working with that seem to be quite on it. They're partly because they have to. Legislation's moving at a pace.
That's the bit that I sort of not struggle with. I suppose maybe I do struggle with it. Just trying to get to grips with the positioning on it. It's like there is an agenda for what it needs to be like for sustainability, rather than actual like a desire. I'd rather there was a desire to get to it, where instead of it being a sales tool, so I can explain to someone, oh, you're bringing down your total cost of ownership because you're going to have this installed for 15 years. Everything's made of aluminium, which is recyclable.
Yeah.
And 70% of all aluminium that's in Populous at the moment has already been recycled. So this is all proven. You can look at the lifespan and go, I can break this down numbers-wise so that the accountant that's going to sign this off is going to go, yeah, do you know what, I'm happy with that pitch.
Yeah.
Let's move forward. But no one actually... Well, very few people seem to actually care about the impact on the ecological sort of like side of things, and what are you doing for making things last, making things stay. I wish that was more of a desire piece, where someone was grabbing the bull by the horns and going, we've made this outrageous decision. Our price is going to go up by 20%, but we've acknowledged that 20% is going to give us 5 years more longevity out of the product. Everything's going to be automatically software updatable at no extra cost to the end user, and everything's made out of recycled products. I think that there's certain companies that would then look at that and go, I will choose to buy that more expensive stuff because it's going to tick a CSR box for them on a buyer's sheet.
Yeah.
So it's like there's got to be policy in place to make it work, but it's like how do you join the two dots together to make it so you're not just pushing something in one specific vein to try and increase a sale?
The thing is, I have exactly that argument when I'm talking about DE&I as well. So it is about ticking boxes. Unfortunately,
it shouldn't be about ticking boxes because you
Can
lose the value, don't
expand
you?
the acronym for everybody, because plugging the air gap means we're filling in the gaps for people that don't necessarily know.
Talk like you're talking to me. You've got to break it right down.
So when I'm talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion,
now I
it
feel
still
included.
feels, and sustainability and corporate social responsibility, all of these things still feel like a tick box. But one thing that has changed from government is because I work predominantly in pre-sales and working on tenders, we are now seeing that most social value questions are weighted in the region of 10% of the overall score.
Really?
It used to be 0 pass-fail.
So
for
the
information
10%
only.
weighting. So how does that work for someone who doesn't understand a bid?
So
or
it will be slightly different for each bid because there'll be a quality element and a financial element to it. So say a bid was 60% on quality and 40% on price. It's then they do a magic equation to weight it out. But 60% normally if I went back even 2 years, I would say the question around recycling would be about what are you going to do with the packaging when you're on my site?
Yeah. Are you going to take it away, or do I have to put it in the skip?
Do I have to do it?
Yeah.
And it would be weighted at maybe 2%, 3%. Now the questions that are coming through, and a lot of this has come, and it has come from central government. There is a social value model now, particularly if you are bidding for work within the public sector. You've got to demonstrate that if you're successful and you are being given public money, that there are other benefits over and above the kit going into a space to the people who are going to be delivering. So whether that's training, whether that's improving opportunities for disadvantaged groups, leading to accredited training, perhaps, and actually you've got to demonstrate that that's happening. So it's not just, you can't just say, oh yeah, we've got this
we're doing
bit
this
of
in the
paper,
community,
or we've got this ISO. You've actually got to give practical examples and follow that up.
Oh, wow.
So seeing that shift, which is relatively new, is really interesting because it's going to force people. I've always maintained until it hits someone's bottom line, they're not going to take that interest, and that's where it doesn't join up.
Yeah.
Because it's just can't you copy and paste that from something else? That's always been the attitude, and the thing that is you have to force it sometimes, unfortunately, and then the next set, it then becomes habit, and then it becomes a desire that actually no, this is the way we work,
Yeah.
and so we're a bit,
In the middle.
unfortunately,
Yeah.
it's not a bad place to be, because the stick is working.
Yeah. The carrot or the stick, eh? Yeah. He's trying to get people to adopt a change there in any format. You've got to be able to see what the advantage is. I used to say, if I talk to a client we've never ever spoken to before, and I've got speaker manufacturer A, and I'm going, I want you to buy a KRA, and they'll go, okay, that's cool. Why? And then whatever the discussion goes from that point, I need to be able to emphasise or impact on that individual why I think that is better than that. But then also in a position that I hold, which is sort of like doing a bit of this could work, that could work. Have you thought about this? Have you not thought about that? So exploring what the actual brief is for the client. I do also have a duty of care. If when they start talking more, and then what I've put forward with Take KRA isn't right, I need to then be in a position comfortably enough to go, actually, mate, you don't want that in this space. You'd be better with this. And the best thing I can do then is go, and I've got a mate who does that, so let me take that ownership off you, and I'll put you two in contact, and you do that, because then ultimately it's better for everybody in the industry. And the most important thing is that the end user gets what is appropriate to them for that specific job.
Yeah.
It doesn't always work that way.
No.
I think one of our guiding principles all the way through has always been about what's right for the job.
Yeah.
And it would seem counterproductive to offer an alternative outside of what your product offering is that you're tasked with selling every day. But I think, again, we come back to that age-old term of integrity, and that you can hold your head up high and say, actually, do you know what? We've done the right thing there, because the customer who's paying for that is getting what's appropriate for their requirement. And I don't think anybody can lose sleep then in the process. For me, it's always been about infrastructure.
Yeah, but you do get the customers where you're dealing with the ego of, but I want this.
Yeah.
And you know it doesn't, it's not going to work, and it's not going to look right, sound right, but they still want it.
So no one wants to say these things. Audio is audio, and it's subjective. So
Yeah.
there is no right or wrong necessarily to the answer. There are different platforms. There are different manufacturers who make different things. My personal belief, and this is a personal belief, is that when you factor back up the scale of who can design product, that I'm under a firm belief there's only about 20 people in the world at any one time who have got the vision or engineering capabilities to fully progress new product or design something in a loudspeaker, for instance, that is groundbreaking or changing the way things are delivered. And out of those 20 people, I think half of them have probably worked for various different manufacturers along the way before they ended up making their own brand or something like that. But there's very few people that have got that capability to really design stuff. So ultimately, they're all variations on a theme. They all deliver something, and then it becomes about value. And if if you get a bill for 10,000 quid for a loudspeaker, it really shouldn't matter what badge is on the front of it. They should sound like 10 grand's worth of speakers.
Yeah.
What does 10 grand's worth of speakers sound like?
Oh, you said it's subjective, isn't it?
Depends on the room.
There's so many factors involved in it, and but ultimately the bare bones of quality from that one source should be of an exceptional quality, because how can you equate? I am amazed. I make a living and have done for a long time now out of selling stuff that I believe is not hugely important to the world as a whole. I'm lucky. I enjoy what I do.
Sound is important, man.
Yeah, I'm not saying it isn't, but the fluffy end of sound, the nice to haves, the things that are luxury items, they're not always.
We're not talking about hearing aids.
No, no, that is important, isn't it?
That is,
yeah, super
Don't get me wrong. A
important.
sound experience is important in a lot of places. I'm not trying to dispute it, but when you consider pallet loads of speakers coming out of a warehouse that have got an attributed value of hundreds of thousands of pounds attached to them. Like, sorry, that wasn't me, by the way. There
That
was
was
a chair
amazing.
moving upstairs.
Yeah. I love those noises.
Hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of kit. Like, that's more than people's houses. So how do we equate that sound experience at that value and the subjective nature of valuing an item? Now, if it's done from a manufacturing perspective, obviously you've got your cost of materials, R&D. You equate the cost of producing that product at a certain point. You then have to factor in all of the different routes to distribution, to sale, to market, and you end up with a price on the street, a list price. There's lots of devaluing that goes on in that just by its inherent nature. Or sorry, adding value at that point. The devaluing comes afterwards when everybody realises that you can't put a figure on a particular item that's that high. So you have to come back to realms of sense and reality that one item costing more than someone's house is not relatively good value for money. And if you're talking about then public money as well, how do you equate that? It's a speaker. It should make a noise. And that's when we get into the subjective arguments and the routes to market that are interesting as a manufacturer's representative, or even as a manufacturer of microphones for Sontronics, for those that don't know. Sorry, scrupulous plug.
Plug.
But he's moving in. It's something that we've done in the last 12 months. Is moved from being a distributor into being a distributor with a manufacturing arm as well, and that's a really interesting process. Understanding sourcing components and bringing things through. Yeah, there is a massive cost to that, and you have to really allow for those things to take place. Keeping quality, maintaining standards, going back to things like sustainability. Looking at all those processes, really being aware of it, and obviously the levies and the costs and things that are being attributed to stuff has to all be factored into one thing. But I just find it's such a vast subject. It's amazing with so many different tangents. But the original point was, and I did
That was a good tangent.
I did run away with it a little bit. But the good point of it was, or the proper point of it was, that infrastructure should be key. In your work in bid management, how much of that infrastructure planning do you see if you're producing a bid response, when you're going through that? And if you've been doing that for a long time, you've probably seen a lot of them, and it's a task, obviously, a job that you take on as a role. So there's obviously a lot of work to do in that, and preparing those submissions is quite an undertaking. What are the really good ones? What makes a really good tender to look at? What are the things that you need to look at?
I think there are so many factors. The tenders where you've got a bit of freedom, and the design team can actually have a free hand to really think about. So if it's an auditorium, where are people going to be sitting? What will it sound like for somebody sitting in the back corner to somebody sitting at the front? Great. When it's prescriptive and you're really, well, we only want this and we can only have this, or it's a grade listed building, or you go for a site visit and you realise the acoustics are absolutely awful. You've got glass walls going down two sides, or there are so many factors that come into what makes a solution. Yeah. But there are so many rooms that you go into and you think, this is absolutely terrible for sound. And I think what people don't realise is that there's often less, more importance given to the visual. So they want the shiny screen, they want the video wall, they want, they're looking at what's being projected. Audio, I think, still is the poor relative when it comes to design. It really shouldn't be, but to my mind, I think, well, if the image went down, you can still carry on. Mm-hmm. You can still carry on your call, right? We could still carry on if the video failed.
Yeah, Just put
But
cardboard
it would be
cutouts out.
really boring for people to look at our faces and there to be no audio for this recording.
Yeah, but if you
right?
were listening on Spotify or whatever
Yeah.
streaming platform you chose to use,
Yes, others are available.
yeah, we're not sponsored unless they give us money. I ain't interested. So,
But we're also not the BBC, so we can
oh
say
no,
whatever
we're
we
not.
like.
Yeah,
It's
I'd
great.
never be allowed to work for them. But oh man, I've lost my point now.
Sorry.
I can't remember what it was.
Video being given
Oh
more
yeah.
importance than
If you were
audio.
listening on a podcast,
Yeah.
you wouldn't pay any attention. You'd just be
No.
like, "Well, I haven't seen anything. I know no difference. I'm still
But if you
getting the
couldn't
audio
hear
output."
it properly,
Yeah, you turn
if
it
it
off
was
or you pause
crackly
it
or
or you go
was
backwards.
poor, yeah, you just wouldn't. You would just give up.
Yeah.
So that doesn't really answer your question, but
Well, no,
it's just
it's a
there are
broad
so many
subject.
factors.
Yeah.
I
it's
don't think a
very
lot of
broad
people
subject.
know what bids or tenders are. I know that we do because we work in the industry, but I remember when I started in it and I was used to driving lorries and I'm like, what's a tender?
Everyone's in sales is all I say. It's sales. It's
It's
still
sales, yeah. And then it's like,
just,
what's a bid?
yeah,
You know, it is still
Formalised
sales. It's
sales.
formalised sales,
Yeah.
isn't it? When someone says, this is what I want,
yeah.
how much are you going to sell
And
it for?
it's competitive, so it's more of a formal process than going out. So in the old days, you would go out for 3 quotes, like you would if you were having a conservatory built at home, right? You get your quotes and you decide what it is. It's exactly the same.
Love conservatory.
It's exactly the same
Yeah.
principle, basically,
With more paperwork.
but with a lot more paperwork, depending on the customer. And
Yeah. That's the other thing, I suppose, like the bit I clocked onto was you saying about the design team having the freedom to be able to influence the design.
yeah,
I suppose that depends on if there's been a consultant in place, which is normally the case if something's gone out to tender.
yeah, not always.
Because some people do
Not
in-house
always.
designs and then just put it
Yeah,
out for tender and it all goes wrong.
Yeah, I mean, some of the organisations, public sector organisations that we work for, don't have the budget for consultants, so that sometimes is quite nice. Consultants, it can work. Sometimes it's a good thing. Sometimes it's restricting. It just depends. It also depends on the end user, whether they are really fixated with a certain brand and they're really married to it. Which you get that across an estate. You want consistency. You want your users to be able to walk into any space and be able to use it and be familiar with the kit. And I think that's a really big mistake, because unless all of your rooms are identical,
Yeah.
why would you want them to all be the same?
I've worked on some of those contracts. It's a nightmare.
Uniformity.
Yeah.
But
Some of the big ones are absolutely crazy, though. You know, you get someone like Bezos or whatever, and in his head, he's like, I want to be able to walk into Azerbaijan or Venezuela or Brighton
yeah.
or Blackpool.
And have exactly the same.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
This kit's the same, that cable's the
Yeah.
same, this looks like that looks like that, and
Yeah.
that's what I want.
But
And
that's
this- yeah.
understandable when you talk about it from a figurehead like that.
Yeah, but that's understandable to the figurehead, but the people who are actually using it rather than that particular figurehead, is there any impact if that figurehead has a helper with them that says, you need to plug into this
Take
instead?
the other figurehead like an Elon Musk. I'm assuming
have
that.
to?
Well, no, but,
Yeah.
but I'm assuming
No,
that he would want the uniformity, because if every time you get into a Tesla car, you get uniformity.
Yeah.
The variations that exist are so minor.
But that's manufacturing to keep costs down.
Well, yeah, but why wouldn't you want that deployed so that the user? But bearing in mind, it's based on user experience.
Yeah.
So, if as an owner of said car, you get into that car, you're comfortable immediately. You can reference all the controls. You know exactly what you're doing once you've done. Once you've done one once. I mean, it's a great example of the end user interaction and the lack of training. Tesla owners at the beginning are a breed unto themselves, because it's like all knowledge of driving for however many years disappears out the wall. Oh, I don't know how to do anything. But yet it's the simplest, most easy of cars to operate. Like, you actually have very little control, but all of a sudden all that knowledge goes out the window and you're faced with a new experience. And so even though it is an iPad on wheels...
You've basically just explained to me so many near-death experiences with
Oh, yeah,
Teslas.
totally.
Yeah,
There's no-
in one
there's-
sentence. iPad on wheels.
It is an iPad on wheels. But that user experience, it comes back to it as being consistent at least. So even when you've had one go, you kind of know where you're starting from the next time if you sit in another one. I mean,
But rooms aren't like that, are they?
No.
but the tech within the rooms.
But there's so many others. So
Yeah, well, like you were saying
A
about
screen
glass,
in
though,
one
or
room,
about the
yeah.
height of a ceiling, or the, like what kind of
yeah.
floor have you got? Is it marble? Is it carpet?
But should that change the user experience? I'm not saying that the design of the equipment deployed to achieve the desired output shouldn't change, but the ultimate of the end control.
yeah, the control, the design, yes, to an extent, but the kit might have to change. Like saying, well, we only have 32-inch screens if it's a massive space and somebody can't see it, or
Yeah. So, does sense prevail, or does it sort of falter in that process then of tendering?
often things get bunched up. So they'll say, we've got this many large meeting rooms and this many medium meeting rooms and this many small meeting rooms, but you're kind of getting closer to there being an element of variation on a design, on a theme.
But you still maintain uniformity on the whole.
But you still, so you do see that. So you get groups of spaces that have been bunched into a category.
Bearing in mind there are there are only a few trade bodies within AV. How has the industry allowed that to take place?
There's
Do
no
you feel?
there's no bodies.
Well,
Do you mean like as in adoption, like as in Dante, or
well,
like
as
AV
in,
over
like,
IP?
as in,
or
if so, yeah, okay. So there are very few standards that are set. So as an industry that's deploying stuff across, in a growing sector, that the use of AV systems in public or even private spaces, has augmented massively over the years. But because of the lack of trade bodies or particular standards that are set, how has that been allowed to take place? So as most consultants have gone through either manufacturing or integration as a starting point. They've developed their careers and become consultants who are then paid to take on the design and interpretation for end users. If I'm a CEO of a large organisation, I have no particular interest in the specifics of the kit. I just know that I want to sit in a meeting room and press that button and it works. So consultant comes along to interpret that requirement, and then through their own research, their job is to filter out everything else and end up with a consistent design that works to meet that requirement. So how have we as an industry allowed ourselves to be in a position where we're fighting each other effectively to deliver those results?
Because unfortunately the skill set is not consistent. So once somebody thinks, well, this works, so I'm going to stick to that, and then they're working in one way, and then someone else comes along and says, that's ridiculously complex, I can do it so much simpler.
It's so interesting you say that. So, like, when we loop back to the start about the adoption of teachers and
Yeah.
technology, and that definite weird gap of trying to get someone to adopt the technology or not want to. I was talking to a guy who represents for LTSMG, who's a lovely lad who lives local to me, and we were having a discussion about a specific university, and I walked into the room and was like, dude, this is mental. Like, it's like a time warp on this side of the room and then like Star Trek on that side of the room. What's going on? And he was like, well, the story goes, this lecturer, who is a famous lecturer, will not use any of that technology.
Wow.
They will not use any of it. So they do all of their classes with chalk and a blackboard, or with a marker and a whiteboard. And that's what they'll use. They don't want any of that technology. And they take, because the way that they teach, they've taught themselves to teach in rote and writ. So if you interrupt their flow, they can't teach it to you. So they have that for them. That's their tool for them to be able to unlock that knowledge to depart on someone else. So they don't want to adopt the technology. Whereas a lot of the younger people that are coming through that have grown up with technology, they're so much more capable to use it. They're much more confident. So they adopt it, and then their lectures are completely different. So on one day in this specific lecture hall, you've got a guy using a blackboard and doing it like something you'd see from the 1950s. And then the next lecture in, you've got this young, amazing lady teacher who is doing incredible interactive throwing stuff all around the classroom and getting the whole room moving. You're like, it's like complete chalk and cheese.
You've got another. I can't think of the right word, but the students that are coming in now are less likely to respond to that old style as well. So you've got another pressure
Yeah.
to actually provide spaces that students,
Engaging.
when they come round on open days, you've got to provide rooms that they look at and think, yeah, this looks like somewhere that is going to be with the times, and I'm going to have an enjoyable learning experience.
Yeah.
It's another dynamic.
That's mad, though, isn't it? But that's the constraint for trying to understand the space, isn't it? Like, if you had that brief for that room, you go, I've got this and I've got that. The two things are polar opposites. I still need you to go and build me a room that covers all of that. I think that's the bit where we fall over, is that there's so much grey area.
And it's
on
really
it.
interesting that teacher doesn't want to adopt the tech, because and that's always been a battle with teachers, that teachers are constantly telling their students to learn, right?
But they don't want to do it themselves.
But they don't want to do it themselves. What is? I've never got to the bottom of that.
Yeah.
That they're absolutely terrified of learning something new themselves.
Well, we're going to get a teacher on to find out.
No way. You're going to get out the those that
We're going
can't
to
do
find
teach.
someone to tell us all
those
about
who can teach. or
No, those who
can't.
can't
Those
teach.
that can't teach
Those
do.
that can't do teach.
Those who
but those
can't, comma, teach.
Yeah.
I mean, we've covered a few things. There's a couple of bits that we wanted to quickly ask you as well before we get to the end of this episode. This is your opportunity to plug. So you're involved in a few different bits and pieces. I know that you have your own podcast, so we're cross-platforming here. This is great.
Wow.
Tell us about your podcast.
My podcast is very quiet at the moment because I've been busy doing other things.
Cool.
But it does focus on... I have conversations with people about discrimination in our industry and how we can all be better. So I've been very privileged for people who've told me things and shared things offline and on camera, which hasn't always. Sometimes it's been really quite hard and quite deep. The kind of things people are going through, because I think what we forget as an industry, or too many people forget, is that we are great because of our people, and. Yes, the tech is wonderful and everything, but actually if everybody disappeared tomorrow, that tech isn't going to do anything.
I'm almost the other way around. I actually don't really care about the tech.
Yeah,
I love
same.
making
Yeah.
noise. I
Yeah.
love the people.
Yep.
It's the people that do it
Yep.
for me all the time.
Same.
What's your podcast called for our listeners?
It's called What If,
With
What
two Fs.
If,
with two
Two
Fs
Fs.
as a play on my name,
and where can people find that podcast?
on YouTube.
On YouTube. So if you want to check out a slightly different element to If That's Work, please check out What If with two Fs on YouTube.
I also co-lead the Avixa Women's Council. So we, as a group, we have a committee of volunteers based across the UK. We sit under a wider global women's council, Avixa Women's Council. But the UK team work really hard in our own time to put on events and webinars to bring the community together. It's not just for women, even though our, if we had a mission, really is about raising the profile of women in the industry.
Kieran had a thought about this. Didn't
Yeah,
he?
yeah. I said it to you before, didn't you? When we were chatting, and you were like, "Oh, you should come down and listen to that." And I said, "I can't go. I'm a bloke."
No.
And you were like, "No, you
No,
can."
what we need is allies and strong
Yeah.
allyship.
Yeah.
And that's what we've really aimed for. And in the last year, we've been blown away. Attendance has grown to live events, our webinars. We did a webinar on men's mental health last year for International Men's Day, because having strong allies in an industry which is predominantly male is essential for women to
Yeah.
progress.
I think it's such an interesting thing as well, because I was going to say all, but that would be very wrong. There's an awful lot of men in the world who choose to have a female partner and who have daughters, and it's always like weirded me out. I'm like,
Yeah.
how can this not exist? If you're married, or you might not be married, however you choose, whatever your circumstances are, or you're bringing daughters into the world, surely you want the best thing for them. I've always struggled with the difference between the two.
Yeah.
But it exists,
It
and to
does,
say it doesn't
yeah.
exist is just stupid.
It's a societal Gender pay gap is a big one, right? So
Yep.
that now is being addressed to a point in certain organisations, especially where they have to publicly declare. But the mentality behind that is, well, you're a man and you're the breadwinner, so you will need to earn more. So that's why you get paid more for doing exactly the same job as a woman. So it's
That's bad, isn't it?
sounds bonkers, but
Very
that's
bonkers.
But that's what we've grown up with.
One of my best mates at the moment is literally having the discussion of like, what's going to go on? Am I going to go and work full time, or are you going to go and work full time? But you can earn more money than I can because of your skill set, even though I've been working for 20 years in the industry that I'm working in. Like, what do we actually want to do as a family?
Yeah.
And then gear that around. The kids are at this age and they've got to be here, there, and everywhere.
Yeah.
They're just having a really normal adult conversation about it. There's no like, well, you're going to go to work because you can earn more because there's no glass ceiling for you.
Yeah.
That's,
But
it's just
but
madness.
also protecting. I've seen it the other way as well, where I know of a friend of mine who was overlooked for promotion because he chose to be I hate the word house husband.
Married to the house.
But yeah, exactly. But because of that reason, he chose to go part time because it made sense for them as a family.
Yeah.
He was overlooked for promotion. So those biases exist across the board, unfortunately. So the more we can talk about it, which is what my podcast is about,
Absolutely. So perhaps,
then it sounds more ridiculous.
Well, perhaps we can switch it one day, and we'll come onto your
Absolutely,
podcast, and,
yes,
and
please.
you can lead the narrative and grill.
Yeah, I'll be
Grill
definitely inappropriate.
Yeah.
I genuinely find biases like so fascinating because everybody has them.
It's impossible to
It's
not have
exactly.
bias.
It's impossible.
Yeah.
And the older you get, the more bias you
Yeah.
have.
Yeah.
So then, the only thing you can really do is to actually acknowledge your bias and
Be
then
aware
try
of it.
exactly
Yeah.
be aware and try and
Yeah.
understand why you have it, where it comes from,
And embrace it.
exactly, and
Yeah.
go, why am I like this? Why am I making that decision? Am I making it because of bias? And if it is it a bias that I'm conscious of?
Yeah.
And if I'm conscious of it, am I happy with it?
Yeah.
And you have control over it,
Yeah.
and then you can change it.
And just accepting that other people will have different things.
Yeah,
We overcomplicate it as well.
we do.
And I think that's a wonderful place for us to conclude our conversation today. I'd like to thank joining us. It's been
Thank
a
you.
real pleasure to have you
Ifat.
here. Thank you for joining us on the To Be Social podcast here with Ifat Chowdhury. Myself, Sam, and Kieran, we'd like to say thank you very much. Take care. Goodbye. Don't forget
care,
to
goodbye.
like, follow, share, comment, subscribe, do all those wonderful things. Bing, 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 bing. See you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.